Right now, a 15-point American peace proposal is sitting on a table in Tehran. It did not arrive through a diplomat. It did not arrive through the United Nations. It did not arrive through any of the traditional channels that have defined international diplomacy for decades. It arrived through Pakistan. The United States Special Envoy to the Middle East confirmed this in a White House cabinet meeting this week, that Pakistan, a nation of over 254 million people in South Asia, is now the official messenger in one of the most dangerous diplomatic standoffs on Earth. A war is ongoing. A strait that carries roughly a fifth of the world's oil supply is partially blocked. And the two countries at the center of it, America and Iran, are not talking directly to each other at all. So here's the question that should be on everyone's mind. How did Pakistan end up as the secret line between Donald Trump and the Islamic Republic of Iran? And what does that mean for the rest of us? But by the end of this video, you will understand three things. First, why Pakistan is uniquely positioned to do something no other country on earth can do right now. Second, what a successful deal would actually require, and why both sides are still far apart. And third, what this quiet diplomatic role means for Pakistan's future, for the Middle East, and for the price of oil in your country. Stay with me, because this story goes much deeper than the headlines suggest. To understand what is happening right now, you need a short history lesson. In 1979, Iran's revolution ended the country's ties with the United States. 45 years later, those two countries still have no embassies in each other's capitals, no ambassadors, no direct diplomatic line. When Iran and the US need to communicate, even on something routine, they have to go through a third party. And since 1992, the third party has been Pakistan. Inside the Pakistani embassy in Washington, D.C., there's a section staffed by Iranian personnel. It is called the Interests Section of the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is, in every practical sense, Iran's closest thing to an embassy in America. Pakistan is its guardian. Pakistan is its host. Pakistan is, institutionally, the one country that sits between these two governments every single day, not as a crisis measure, but as a permanent structural fact. Now, at a war. On February 28th of this year, U.S. and Israeli forces launched strikes against Iran's nuclear facilities at Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo. The conflict, now entering its fourth week, has, according to reports, killed more than 2,000 people and displaced millions more. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway through which enormous volumes of global oil supplies pass, has been partially disrupted. Energy markets around the world have reacted sharply. Iran has its own conditions for ending the fighting. The U.S. has its own. And neither side is willing to pick up the phone and talk to the other directly. But here is where it gets complicated. Pakistan is not just a neutral postman in this crisis. What it is doing goes much deeper. And it connects to relationships, personal favors, and strategic interests that most analysts haven't fully mapped yet. Let's start with what we know, confirmed and on record. This week, Pakistan's Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar publicly stated that his country is facilitating indirect talks between Washington and Tehran. His exact words, U.S.-Iran talks, are taking place through messages relayed by Pakistan. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff confirmed this at a White House cabinet meeting, saying the 15-point American peace framework, the document that lays out Washington's conditions for ending the war, had been, in his words, circulated through the Pakistani government, acting as the mediator. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif separately spoke with Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and called for urgent de-escalation. He then publicly posted on social media, tagging both Trump's envoy and Iran's foreign minister, saying Pakistan stands ready and honored to be the host for direct talks in Islamabad. Trump, for his part, extended a deadline he had set for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He announced a 10-day pause on threatened strikes against Iranian power plants, citing, quote, very good and productive conversations. Iran has denied that any negotiations with the United States are taking place. Its officials said Washington is negotiating with itself. At the same time, Iran's foreign ministry acknowledged it is reviewing the American proposal, and according to multiple diplomatic sources, Iran has submitted its own 5 conditions in response, including war reparations and recognition of its rights over the Strait of Hormuz. So, a proposal has been sent, a response has come back, messages are being relayed, and Pakistan is the country doing the relaying. But why Pakistan, specifically? What gave this country the access, the trust, and the influence to pull this off? The answer involves decades of quiet positioning, and one remarkably well-timed lunch. Analysts suggest Pakistan's emergence here is not accidental. It is the product of a very deliberate strategy, built over years, that is now paying off at exactly the right moment. Start with the structural advantage. As we noted, Pakistan has hosted Iran's diplomatic interests in Washington since 1992. That is not a symbolic arrangement. That means Iranian personnel work inside Pakistani embassy walls. That means Pakistani officials have a direct, institutionalized line into Iranian diplomatic thinking in the American capital. No other country has that combination. Then consider what happened over the past year. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir made multiple visits to Tehran, meeting senior Iranian leadership. They built personal relationships at the highest level of the Iranian government. Iran's new supreme leader even mentioned Pakistan specifically in his Persian New Year message, saying he held a, quote, special feeling toward its people. At the same time, Pakistan was cultivating its relationship with the Trump White House. In June 2025, Munir sat down for lunch at the White House with President Trump, an unprecedented visit. A sitting U.S. president had never previously hosted a Pakistani military chief who was not also serving as head of state. That meeting lasted more than 2 hours. Trump said publicly afterward that Pakistan knows Iran very well, better than most. This was not flattery, it was a signal. Analysts also point to a more granular detail. Pakistan signed a memorandum of understanding with a company linked to Zach Witkoff, the son of U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. In an administration where personal relationships carry enormous weight, that connection is not minor. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio publicly praised Pakistan's willingness to play a mediating role. Pakistan also became a member of Trump's Peace Council, with Sharif attending its launch in Washington. The picture that emerges is of a country that spent months placing itself at the intersection of two hostile powers, not by luck, but by design. Analysts also suggest Pakistan has its own strong reasons to want this war to end. Pakistan shares a long border with Iran. It imports significant energy from the Gulf. Millions of Pakistani workers live and send money home from Middle Eastern countries. Every week this conflict continues, Pakistan's own economy feels the pressure. And this leads to something even more significant. Because Pakistan's role isn't just about passing messages. If talks actually happen in Islamabad, the country hosting those talks shapes the agenda. And that changes everything. If Pakistan successfully facilitates a ceasefire or a peace framework, the consequences extend far beyond any single diplomatic outcome. Analysts suggest that a successful mediation would mark Pakistan's formal arrival as a major geopolitical player, not just in South Asia, but in the broader Islamic world and in great power competition. Pakistan's own officials have drawn a direct comparison to 1971, when Pakistan served as the secret channel between Washington and Beijing that enabled the historic Nixon-China opening. If this moment works, Islamabad will have pulled off something similar, at arguably higher global stakes. For the United States, if this continues, Pakistan becomes an indispensable partner in Middle Eastern diplomacy in a way it has not been before. That upgrades Pakistan's leverage in its own requests of Washington on debt relief, military cooperation, and international standing. For Iran, routing talks through Pakistan offers a crucial face-saving mechanism. Tehran can maintain its public denial of direct negotiations with the United States while still communicating its conditions through an intermediary it considers friendly and trustworthy. Iran has publicly praised Pakistan's role. Analysts suggest Tehran sees Pakistan not as a neutral party, but as a state that understands the Iranian perspective. There are, however, serious complications. Israel has not been mentioned in any of the active mediation by any party. And analysts warn that any framework Pakistan helps broker will need to satisfy not just Washington and Tehran, but also Israeli security concerns, which remain the central driver of why this war began. Pakistan also has no formal ties with Israel, and Israel has been explicit in signaling that its military campaign will continue, regardless of diplomatic developments elsewhere. If Pakistan succeeds in bringing the parties to the table, but the framework excludes Israel's core demands, the complete dismantlement of Iran's nuclear program, then what looks like a diplomatic breakthrough today could fracture under pressure tomorrow. And this leads to something even more significant coming up next. Here is why this matters to you, wherever you are watching from. The Strait of Hormuz is not an abstract geopolitical concept. It is a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman through which an enormous share of global oil and liquefied natural gas passes every single day. When that strait is restricted, energy prices move. And when energy prices move, everything else moves. Fuel costs, food transport, manufacturing, inflation. Russia and China have already publicly expressed concern over the restrictions and warned that further escalation could widen the conflict and destabilize global energy supplies. Global shipping has been disrupted, markets have reacted, and every day the war continues without a diplomatic resolution adds pressure to an already fragile global economy. For South Asia specifically, and this is an angle most international coverage misses entirely, the stakes are particularly acute. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, these are nations that depend on stable Gulf energy imports. Millions of South Asian workers in the Middle East are facing uncertainty. Remittances, which are lifelines for families across the region, are at risk. Food prices, already a pressure point, could climb further if shipping lanes remain unstable. Pakistan understands this better than almost any other country. And that understanding is part of what makes its mediation role genuine, not just diplomatic ambition, but economic survival. Based on everything we have covered, here is the analytical conclusion. Pakistan's emergence as the central messenger in the US-Iran standoff is not a coincidence and not a surprise to those who have been watching Islamabad's diplomatic maneuvering over the past 18 months. It is the result of years of deliberate relationship building on both sides, combined with a structural role that no other country holds. The prediction: if a ceasefire agreement is reached in the coming weeks, Pakistan will emerge from this crisis with a level of geopolitical influence it has not held since its Cold War peak. It will have demonstrated that it can operate at the intersection of Washington and Tehran, a space no other nation currently occupies. However, one factor could change this outcome entirely. That factor is Israel. If Israeli military operations continue or escalate regardless of any US-Iran diplomatic framework. And Israeli officials have signaled they retain the right to do exactly that. Then even a successful Pakistani-mediated ceasefire may not hold. No agreement brokered through Islamabad can be durable if one of the core actors in the conflict does not consider itself bound by it. That is not a minor caveat. It is the single largest variable in this entire equation, and it remains unresolved. We started with a question. How did Pakistan end up as the secret line between Donald Trump and the Islamic Republic of Iran? The answer is, it was never entirely secret. It was structural, historical, strategic, and personal. Pakistan built this position over decades, through an interest section in an embassy, through border geography, through carefully cultivated relationships in Washington and Tehran, and through the kind of quiet diplomatic patience that rarely makes front pages until it suddenly becomes the most important story in the world. The world's most dangerous standoff is, right now, being managed through a country most global audiences have not been watching closely enough. That changes today. If this video gave you clarity that mainstream coverage didn't, subscribe. Next analysis drops in 3 days.